Hey everyone, welcome to the edition of This is Recruiting, where we are talking about the intersection of AI and ATS and the impact it will have on future tech hiring. I'm Naved Anand from the international at HackerEarth, and if you're new here, allow me to give you a small introduction about who we are. HackerEarth is a global company that helps large enterprises recruit, evaluate, and upskill developers based on specific skills. Our platform enables recruiters to make the most accurate and informed decisions about candidates, improving hiring efficiencies, facilitating continuous learning and development, and ensuring the right developers are matched with the right positions. If you have any more questions about HackerEarth, please feel free to type them out and my team will help in answering them. Now, today, on this AI-centric edition of a webinar, we've got three amazing guests. First, we have Mr. Deepu Xavier, co-founder of our ATS partner, ZappyHire. Deepu has an experience of over 18 years in building products across India, US, and Europe. Prior to starting ZappyHire, he was the principal product manager for Java at Oracle. Acknowledged for his impact, he also made to the Economic Times Young Leaders of India list in 2012. Next, we have Mr. Phil Struzzola. Phil is the founder of Select Software Reviews, a website dedicated to helping HR and recruiting teams find and buy right software for all their needs. Before starting Select Software, Phil has been an investor and he also holds an MBA from Harvard Business School. And our moderator today, Mr. Madhav Jain, who is the co-founder of BarRaiser, a game-changing interviewing platform leveraging AI to transform hiring. He leads the customer teams at BarRaiser and has over an experience of 17 plus years. He's worked at Scumberger, BCG, and BNB Paribas. He loves most things tech and is an EV enthusiast. Thank you for all taking out time to be here. Madhav, over to you. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Namit. Excited to be here. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, Phil, Deepu. Very nice meeting you guys. And I see we have about 20 attendees. So I'll just jump right into it. For anyone who joins later, I'm sure this webinar would be available as a recording. And we are always at your disposal to take more questions during and later on after the webinar. So in the order that Namit sort of provided the introductions, Deepu, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
As we're talking about recruiting and specifically tech recruiting, when it comes to it, what according to you are the key challenges that recruiters in technology are facing in screening or pre-screening developers, and how can AI really help this entire process, right? Making it more efficient and effective.
Got it. Hey, so first of all, thanks a lot, Manav, for raising that question, because I believe that this is one of the questions that, you go talk to any recruiter, because we being from an applicant tracking system or a recruitment platform background, you go and talk to any customer and you have that, okay, so what is one of the biggest pain point? The area would be, one of the biggest area would be sourcing, another would be screening. That is where the bulk of the activity happens. So today, let me just go a little bit in depth on the pre-screening part. We have two different types of jobs. If you look at it, you have certain easy to fill kind of job positions, and then you have a hard to fill kind of job positions, right? So the moment you take a hard to fill kind of job position, one of the key aspects is the number of applicants might be lesser because it might be a niche role. But the challenge is the recruiters may not be having, even though you call them as a technical recruiter, they may not be having that end-to-end exposure to measure the skill or do skill assessment. Thereby the problem is that a lot of this candidates who potentially may not be good fit for the job end up in the funnel, and the interviewers end up spending time with them, and it's like a lot of waste of time. Now that is true of the hard to fill job. Now, if you look at the easy to fill job, the challenge is you get a lot of applicants. Say, for example, you're just hiring for a junior developer. You get a lot of position, but then the challenge is how you're gonna, filter them. Like you have a lot, maybe 500 to 800 applicants, and recruiters are always pressed for time. In this short span of time, how is the recruiter going to find who's the top 10 or 20 out of that 500? So from that perspective, if I look at it, right, a few of the biggest areas, one is the volume. Depending on the type of job, the volume is a critical area. Now, the next one is the consistency in making a decision. For example, you might face a situation where the recruiter, the same recruiter, might have selected a few set of people, and the next day, the recruiter might have selected a different genre of people. So the consistency in decision making may not be there because there is always this factor of subjectivity when they make this decision. Skill assessment is another area of concern. The end of the day, since they are pressed for time, quantity and the time that they spend to scale to a bigger number is one of the biggest area that pre-screening is facing at this point. Now, coming to the second part of your question, that is when you're asking how AI is going to help you or help a recruiter solve that problem. I think it's really straightforward. I mean, now if you look at it, you have some of the state-of-the-art resume parsers available in the market, which can actually very contextually understand what is the content of the resume, what is the skill proficiency, what are the coordinates to contact the person, the educational, all the background details, So we have a lot of the state-of-the-art resume parsing details. Then on top of it, the technology is so advanced that, even recently we were heavily investing ourselves into doing technical interviews. How can we automate technical interviews? Though those was supposed to be, that holy grail. I mean, people were really, they were challenging themselves that it's not really possible to do an automated technical interview. But now technology is so advanced that we are confident to say, so we can do an automated technical interview. So those are the places where AI is really helping a recruiter, getting the bulk of the resume, parsing it automatically, filtering them automatically by asking some questions, then doing an iterative, an engaging conversation, video conversation with the candidate. So that's something which may sound a bit fancy maybe 2 years back, but now really happy to see the technology is so advanced that it can really do engaging two-way contextual interviews live. So these are some of the ways in which, from a pre-screening perspective, AI is currently supporting, and we see a lot of healthy competition between recruitment platforms on that, which I think was the need of the hour, and I think really happy to see that advancement in the technology and the market.
Thank you, Deepu. That sounds very exciting, and I'm sure quite a few of our attendees would be excited about that whole piece of attaining scale when it comes to assessments. But great. And you mentioned something about easy to fill positions in tech. My personal experience, there aren't any easy to fill positions in tech. But I'm sure a lot of recruiters would agree with me. But no, I totally get what you're saying. And, the sheer number of influx on CVs is tremendous. That brings me to Phil, right? So we discussed about AI, and Phil, at Select Software Reviews, you would look at a lot of these products that are out there, which help, in the overall recruiting cycle. And let's talk about tech in specific. Now, what impact do you think the use of AI would have on candidate experience? Because candidates are not talking to a human, but a machine, let's say, and unknowingly so. And what are the drawbacks, right? And specifically from a developer or a candidate's perspective, like a job seeker's perspective, does it even have a negative effect, or if at all?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of positives, but to focus on the negatives, for sure, it can be dehumanizing, and you're sort of wondering, why aren't I getting the attention of a person? Why am I getting shipped off to this robot? I think that for sure, the human judgment isn't perfect, and AI judgment is extremely far from perfect at this point. And anybody who's used these tools will agree that they're helpful. They're sort of a barometer, but they are not the end all be all. We're a bit of ways away from this technology being able to make accurate, consistent decisions about how good somebody is or isn't. It's a good filtering mechanism, but certainly not a final decision. And so I think it all comes down to communication. So if you think about the current candidate experience pre-AI, you're interacting with some sort of technology at the front end, right? Whether that's an applicant tracking system or some sort of apply flow, maybe it's an assessment. And we have normalized that throughout time. I remember 10 years ago when video interviews started happening and people were really upset that they had to take a video interview. And it's like, why, can't I talk to a real person, et cetera. And I think the companies that leverage that technology the best are saying, look, we're going to get 100 plus applications. We want to understand what you're like beyond your resume. This is an opportunity for you to showcase your skill set. And maybe we're only going to do this with, the top 20% of applicants or something like that. So you've already made it through a screen. And I think it's incumbent upon the recruiting teams to do something similar with any sort of artificial intelligence technology is to communicate, hey, here's why we're doing it. Here's why it's beneficial to you. Be transparent about it. And then also realize that there's some pretty severe limitations to it as well. And make sure that you're treating people respectfully and getting to the right answer while using the tool and all the amazing things it can do, but understanding limitations as well. But if you're on mute, just so you know.
I'm sorry. Thank you. And some of the drawbacks that you mentioned just now, especially, the things around AI not being, decision-making should definitely be human. However, candidates need to be communicated why AI being used. But from a developer's perspective, some of the drawbacks that, it's inhumane, or maybe the companies don't have time. I've been shipped off. What can, companies or recruiters do to minimize these drawbacks? Are there solutions that are technology-based or non-technology-based?
I think for me, it's all about setting the right expectations and explaining why you're doing something. So the rationale for using this technology is that it's going to help you find the right person, and we want to make sure we find the right person so that you don't get in the wrong company. And we don't want to hire the wrong person. We don't want to waste your time in an interview when you don't have, XYZ skill set or working style or whatever it is that the assessment's trying to understand. The other thing is that this allows you, the CV is like pretty meager in terms of like is it a good representation of who somebody is? And these assessments have the ability to add a lot more color beyond that and allow recruiters to spend time in person with the right group of people. And so it's just all about optimizing the right people and the right jobs. And if you explain it in that way, I think people can get more bought into it. I think the other thing is that, you don't want to take a ton of time for somebody to do these things, because unless you're only going to do it with, 5% or 10% of your applications, because it's just not fair. And you're also not going to get the best people to take these. If you're asking all 100 applicants to do an assessment, in my opinion, the best people are just going to be like, I'm all set. I'm going to get 10 other interviews. There's no point for me. My resume speaks for itself.
Right. But if you don't do it for everyone, then that you obviously are leaving, the standardization piece, right?
You are, but there are some people that you don't need it. If you're interviewing for an engineer and somebody, was a senior engineer at Google, you're probably going to interview that person. You don't have to have them take a Python test. If somebody has, maybe they work for a company you've never heard of, or maybe they have like a less strong, like obvious background, then you want to make sure. And that's the way that we do it with our recruiting, is that, let's say we get 100 resumes. There's probably like 2 to 3 that we know we want to interview. There's probably 10 that are maybes and we want to have them take an assessment. And then there's probably like 85 to 90 that we know we don't want to interview.
Interesting. Maybe there's an AI solution to even identify that.
Probably. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where AI is really good, is like a rough cut, right? Like here's 75% of people you don't want to talk to, and let's just tell them, and let's be direct and very responsive. And then here's the part that a person should look at and try to figure out.
Absolutely. I guess decision-making should definitely be with person, especially even the legal landscape is sort of evolving that way. But thank you for that. Deepu, I'll come back to you. Any emerging trends and possibilities? Like you you just said, right, AI has, and we all know in the past few months, the kind of leaps that AI has seen, especially generative AI, is tremendous. But any new trends that are sort of emerging or new possibilities that AI can be incorporated in the recruiting overall, but specifically to ATS platforms for pre-screening of candidates?
I would say, I think just to continue from where Phil stopped, right? One of the emerging areas basically to have more contextual understanding of things, So gone are the days wherein you say that, okay, my organization has 6 rounds of interview. And that was like the last generation, I would say. It's not like a standard set of interviews that's going to happen, across the board for all the jobs, all designation, irrespective of what you're applying, irrespective of your pedigree. I think Phil was mentioning about, the position is for Google. So, I mean, a software engineer, and we have a senior software engineer for Google. So you don't expect the same person to go through the same set of steps because he's already overqualified. He's equally qualified for that position. You don't want to make them wait in the line because end of the day, from a recruitment, as I said, they always press for time. You want to close the position yesterday. That's how the system works always, right? So one of the emerging trends is this contextual understanding. So just taking a step back, one of the biggest aspects why I said initially also, right, now the technology is ready is because of the natural language processing or natural language understanding, NLP, NLU. You give a lot of unstructured free text and you can actually make sense out of it. You can understand it, get insights from it. Imagine there was a time when you have a resume and you also run a lot of rules, to extract data based on patterns, based on regular expressions. You could extract data. That was the early generation of getting data from a resume parser. Now it's gone one more level up, and now looking at the resume, even if you have written, say, Python or business development or marketing as a skill or SaaS sales as a skill, it can even kind of, with a commanding accuracy, it can say what could be the proficiency level of that particular person. So that is the contextual understanding that the system can bring from multi-touch point landscape. It's possible. So one of the emerging trends that I would say is on the NLP, with the advent of natural language processing and understanding, there's a lot of this contextual understanding that's on the table. For example, now you can do a lot of contextual job matching. Imagine a candidate, is coming from Google. So does that mean that candidate is always good? The candidate is good, but may not be a good match. So it's not always about the merit of the candidate. It's about the match between the candidate and the job and the organization. So it's a matchmaking end of the day. So you can't always go by the merit saying that, okay, the candidate has merit, is done it from so-and-so elite, B school, good. But is it a good match for the job, for that company? The DNA, is it matching? So one of the emerging trends is to understand whether that particular candidate is a good match for that particular job and for that particular employer. Means end of the day, what do you mean by right candidate? The candidate who fits for the job, the candidate who will stick on with the organization and start delivering positively to the, the culture and the productivity of what they are entitled to, what they are expected of, isn't it? So that contextual understanding is one of the, the biggest area where people, I mean, what we see from an AI perspective, something that is advancing. Another aspect I would say, just two more, I would say, to summarize. The second one is the predictive part, So there was a period when a person put down the paper, that is when the, the hiring manager says to the recruiter that, one person has put down the paper, 30 days, your clock starts ticking. Now go, let's find a replacement. Now, there are a lot of systems, where we as an organization also try to understand what is the chance that the person might quit. What is the chance that we may want to find a replacement? It could be because of performance. It could be because of satisfaction level. It could be because of career progression. It could be because of the business growth. It could be many of these aspects, based on multiple parameters and multiple signals that we can typically derive. The system actually, start saying, okay, why don't we start looking for a candidate who might be a good fit for a potential opportunity that may come up 2 months down the line. So it's kind of a predictive nurturing or predictive recruitment tools, per se, if you look at it. And the last bit is the engagement part. If you, and now I think there's a lot of push saying that you have to, have human touch with the candidate. Now, giving this automated telephone call, I think that is again of the previous generation. You can just have an automated call and say that, hey, this is somebody from this company and we would like to talk to you. Why don't you apply? And Rather than that, just imagine with the basic data that you have, if the system can actually strike a very or deliver a very personalized message, maybe over WhatsApp or email or telephone call. So that personalization is one aspect. And the second part is the predictive part, and the third part is the contextual understanding. So these three are the three main pillars or verticals where we as an organization have seen and where we are investing a lot towards AI as the next best thing that can come out in the industry.
Wow, that's pretty utopian. Thank you so much. Now that we have spoken about AI and what kind of emerging trends are appearing, something that I sort of really like, and I'm just gonna notch or turn the heat up, is from both of you. I remember one of the classic examples or experiments that was done by Amazon was about AI trying to analyze CVs, and what the results turned out to be quite biased for obvious reasons, right? The kind of data that you use, which is existing already biased, to train the system, obviously results in this. And then we have seen this also as legislatures are coming, like NYC has recently passed the AEDT law, the European Union is in the final stages of AI laws, and I know California and New Jersey are also thinking about it. So with this, what measures do you think companies that are working with AI tools, especially in recruiting space, right? So either companies which are building these tools or companies that are using these tools should take to remove, mitigate, or minimize unconscious bias that is there so humans have it, and because the data also has it, AI sort of might also have it as well. So how does one use AI more ethically and promote or reduce unconscious bias? And I'll open it to both of you.
I'm just curious on the Amazon study. What were the results of that? Like, what sort of bias did it come up with?
So it was
most. Sorry, Leo, please go on.
It wasn't shortlisting female candidates as much for a few roles, as much as it was for male candidates. So the CV was sort of predicting higher chances of success for male candidates for a particular role, and than the female candidates. So that was there because existing data obviously had more males.
Interesting. I'll have to look this one up.
Yeah, you should.
All right. So if I may, I'm sorry, Phil, I think there was a lag.
Go ahead.
All right. So I think, madam, one of the important point here to note is, of course, I mean, this kind of technical advances has its own shortcomings, but I would say the inherent issue was not about the system or the algorithm, right? The inherent problem was the decision that the organization, I mean, let's not just limit it to Amazon. I mean, I think the way traditionally any AI system works is based on the data that you use for training, right? It's the training data that actually matters. Now, if the data that you're giving for training has this bias inside that is when you will typically have the same thing integrated in the system at a later point in time. So if you look at it inherently, the data had the issue, which was a sad truth, that if you look at Amazon's last 10 years, I mean, prior to this issue, if you look at the 10-year historic data, there were more of male candidates who were applying, or there were a lot of male candidates who were getting shortlisted. And that data was used for training. Now, if you ask me whether we could have, I mean, drawing a parallel, if a similar situation happens in the current era, whether there's a way to cancel or nullify that, yes, we do have. If that is where, the system developers or AI architects have to look at the data and see, there are multiple rules that is typically governing. You have this, maybe the equal employment opportunity, or you have this anti-discrimination laws at hand. There are multiple of these factors. Just trying to understand, look at the data and see whether there is any outlier, remove it. Look at if there is any, a bias in the data. The data engineering which has to be done, or data analysis which has exploratory data analysis, I would say. If you do an exploratory data analysis on the training set, you will understand, well, yeah, there is some bias in this one. Either I shouldn't use, or let me clean it up to have an unbiased data set based on which the training itself happens. So technologically, if you look at it, yes, there is always a solution. But if you look at the philosophy, I think there was nothing wrong, because it was the similar decision that happened. But what went wrong is maybe the management would have changed, maybe the way people started thinking would have changed, but that might have changed the last 1 year, as an example. If you look at, you took data for 10 years, 9 years, you had this bias. The last 1 year, the organization changed big time towards positive side. You have 10 years of data. Naturally, the 9 years of data will have more precedence over the previous 1 year. So this bias is bound to happen. So one of the biggest things that any AI system should typically do is look at the data time to time, explore the data, do an analysis, and see from a today's generation perspective, does this data make sense? Is this a good training? It's just like you have a baby and you're trying to teach him based on 1980s rules. You don't do that, right? You teach them based on how industry is today, how the society is today. The same thing applies there. It's basically learning from data that you see, and you give them wrong data, the system will behave, right off. I think that is the point. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, so I hear a lot of modeling or training the model with the right data, or maybe do a little bit of data science as well. I do see merit in that. I'm just curious to how we can do that, and then maybe we'll dive deeper into that. Phil, you have anything to add on?
I think it's a really good overview, and I agree with everything. I think we just can't be lazy. You gotta, at this point in time, double check everything, and probably that'll be the case for quite some time, where just everything needs to be sanity checked, whether you're using Excel or an AI tool. You just can't have something be a black box and trust it.
Right. So when I look at most of these regulations out there, I do see that a lot of them rely on what we call as the lagging indicators. So what they are trying to right now assess is, hey, if you're using an AI tool, what are the outcomes? And I do read a report or audit every outcome every now and then, right? So that we can see the trends. But I'm sure there are things in the industry where, you can attack it from a more leading perspective. Like a lot of companies have started making the job descriptions pretty inclusive, right? The gender neutral and so on. And now as you go along, if you can actually gender neutralize the language, I think you can do it further in the context of other evaluations as you go along, so that the AI only knows that this is a person. They are not able to decipher X or Y. But a lot of interesting work being done in this space. I will jump to the next question, because I know I have to leave some question and answer time for the audience as well. How can HR professionals and tech recruiters upskill themselves, right? So that's another thing. Technology is changing. You have all these nice toys to play with. How do people train or upskill themselves to effectively leverage these pre-screening tools, right? The AI-based pre-screening tools, and make better hiring decisions. Let me put it this way. Again, to both of you, and Phil, you want to take a dig at it first?
Sure. I think in general, you can get a pretty good facility with AI by just opening a free ChatGPT account and just like messing around with it and being like, hey, rewrite this job description, or, write me a job rec for XYZ, or an outreach email, or, what's a good recruiting process for ABC. And I think you'll pretty quickly get a feel for what it's good at, what it's not good at, and maybe how to use it in your life. And then I think on these pre-screening sourcing tools, you just got to start using them. Like there's no reason not to, do a trial and understand why one is going to help you or not help you. And I think there's no substitute for just doing something.
Deepak?
Yeah. Again, when you look at technically or from a product perspective, when you look at any AI-based system, the basis is data, right? For training, you need data. And for getting an inference or a recommendation, again, you need data. So when you look at it, one thing which the recruiters or the users of an AI system should try to understand is, as long as you have data, you might get meaningful decisions, meaningful recommendations. We see from a recruitment perspective, let me just take a couple of examples from our customer base. There was one of the Southeast Asian customer who said to us that we don't want any additional data to be collected from a candidate, just get their LinkedIn URL, email ID, and phone number and name. Because they are worried that the moment you ask more data, they may not, fill the registration form, application form. They just want to make it so easy for a recruiter or for a candidate to apply for the job. Now, having said that, it's a good thing. From a candidate standpoint, you just give very good impression, and the recruiter gets this data, and then they do the manual work. Now, from an AI system perspective, system didn't get anything if you look at it. It just with very minimal data. Of course, there are a lot of this scrapping mechanism, which ethically, maybe people may not be comfortable using it. So from that perspective, you don't have much data about the candidate. Now the question is, how do you literally do pre-screening using just a name, email ID, phone number, and a LinkedIn profile? Right? So from that, so that is where the recruiters also should try to understand that when you're talking about an AI system, they should feed or create an ecosystem where the data is spread into that. Without that, the system will give skewed results. There is nothing much, in their candidate profile. So one of the things that HRs should, or recruiters should be very much cognizant about is how this thing works. I mean, we have this philosophy called explainable AI, right? They should be able to explain the philosophy. They should be able to explain the algorithm behind the scene, under the hood, what's happening. So they know, okay, yeah, this system is making a decision just like how I might take, or one of the best unbiased know-it-all type recruiter is making a decision. So that philosophy, they also should be very clear. What is the basis on which this is happening? Now, suppose there was a time when we used to go to the market and say that we have our own algorithm to rank the candidate. This is based on this 5 parameters. Then the first question that recruiters ask or decision makers ask is, can we tweak this formula to meet our requirement, our way of ranking? So I think the main thing is that end of the day, any AI system, don't consider it as a replacement of your thing. It's basically, the basic philosophy. Technology at the fore and human at the core. That's the end of the day, End of the day, it's about human. You have to take the decision. Everything else that comes up is to aid them to, take the right decision. So I would say the main thing is to understand how this thing works and what is the ingredient towards a successful recommendation to be deciphered or to be, assimilated from an AI-based system. I think that is what a recruiter should try to understand when they're using an AI-based system.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I had a conversation with someone and as Phil was talking about, that they started using ChatGPT and threw some data at it. And then if ChatGPT would agree to what they have done in the past, would feel ecstatic. But if they would not, then would try to, argue with why is it not the way it is not. But I think we need to not learn, that the software needs to learn from us. And what you just said, right? The more context, the more better a prompt and the better the response. Absolutely. I think that's going to help a lot. At the end of the day, decision is human. I'm going to ask maybe 1 or 2 more questions and then open it up for Q&A from the attendees. Now, I know a few, but from your perspective and the areas or regions that you guys operate in or, have context in, do you see any legal or compliance considerations that organizations should be aware of? I mean, they might be, they might not be, but they should be aware of before they pick up an AI tool and, apply it for pre-assessments of candidates.
What I'm aware of is that there have been several states in the US, I think New York was the first one to pass laws that say you can't use any sort of like automated assessment technology, or, it's sort of a broad language that has yet to be tested legally. But I think I would just always err on the side of being a little bit more cautious and empathetic with your candidate pool, especially in today's world where there are a lot of people who are losing their jobs and their stress levels are much higher. It's a different dynamic than it was 18 months ago where it was more, we got to poach somebody. Now it's more people looking for jobs. And I think that you just always want to make sure you're treating people fairly, and that's always going to decrease your risk of any litigation or anything you need to run into. And I would ask when you're looking at vendors to make sure you partner with somebody who's keeping track of these rules and regulations and going to help you stay compliant, because the landscape is changing pretty quickly.
Right. Deepu?
Yeah, I think we'll cover that part, but maybe just to add a couple of more points, it would be, for example, I mean, in US, if you look at it, right, uh, if you have more than 100 employees, you need to be doing equal employment opportunity reporting. It's a matter of compliance. So those time, that might be the time when you see that, okay, you depended heavily on an AI-based system for recruitment and pre-screening and end up like, just like the example that you took some time back, that's Amazon's case. Very similar to that, you shouldn't end up having maybe a particular race or a location or gender. There's some sort of bias towards your hiring process because that equal employment opportunity reporting states that you have to file your hiring outcomes with the authorities on a yearly basis. So that is one. So those are the things, maybe you can say anything related to the Civil Rights Act or the U.S. discrimination law or about the EEPO. So these kind of things have to, ensure that there is no bias happening in the system and it's all fair and square when it comes to recruitment and opportunity. That's point number one. Then, as Phil was saying, it's anything that has to do with automated behavioral interviews, a psychometric assessment. I think there is a lot of, maybe slightly wrong, but I think I'm right. But there's a lot of restrictions in terms of automated behavioral interviews. So you do any psychometric assessment, I think it has to be vetted after a few years of trial, deliberation, proving. It's not an easy thing to do. So those are some of the aspects that you should be really, cognizant about when you're talking from a compliance and a legal perspective, the reporting, the compliance, the equal employment opportunity, the gender discrimination, diversity dashboarding. So those things you should be very much cognizant about before you purchase or procure a applicant tracking system or a recruitment platform. Whether maybe the tool is doing that properly, but if it is not reporting it properly, that's also a concern. You'll end up doing properly, but you don't have a reporting mechanism, and you'll end up, doing a lot of excels again outside of the system, which is not the, the final intention after having all the system, the AI-based system, and then for a diversity dashboard, you again create an Excel sheet outside. So from a productivity perspective, I think these are some of the things which I would, if I were a recruiter, something which I would consider before procuring a recruitment platform from a legal compliance standpoint.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess folks have nothing to worry about in terms of using these tools or AI in their hiring. All you need to do is stay on top of your numbers, your analytics, and continuously observe what's happening, right? And maybe
just to add one more thing, it would be also the data management. That's something across the board, right? I mean, it's not specifically related to AI, maybe the GDPR or compliances. So those things are also a priority, high priority, that you are dealing with a lot of, you're dealing with a lot of data. So one thing which you have to potentially consider is, are you, anonymizing the data? Are you removing the personally identifiable information from the training data? Because there is a lot of data that you're playing with. Whether you are, those anonymization, these things are really important when you're doing. So those matters. I don't want to know Manav or Phil as a person, and then these are the characteristics for training. The name, phone number, email ID doesn't really matter, right? So these are the things which you should, be very much, you should be very careful with when you're playing with the data, because it's something which you don't want to mess up with.
Thanks, very insightful. I guess I have one last question, and I'll probably give you guys a couple of minutes each before we open the forum for Q&A. Especially more looking forward, right? How do you see this evolving? And it could be in the perspective of just this pre-screening, or even, assessments as an overall topic within the recruiting cycle. How does AI evolve? How do you see it evolving?
I think for me, the big question is just at what rate does this technology continue to improve? And it feels like over the last probably 5 years, it's followed an exponential curve and gotten much better. However, it also feels like we're potentially going to see a plateau in the rate of change. And so if it becomes more linear, then I think over the next 2 to 3 years, it probably just becomes a really great way to source and vet candidates. If it continues an exponential curve, then it becomes better than a person probably in the next 3 years. And therefore that would completely change the game, I think, because you'd have basically anybody in a sourcing role sort of doesn't exist anymore, and there's you have to find ways like redeploying that talent within your organization. So I don't like I'm not like a data science person, and so I don't know how much better this technology will get or not. But my feeling is it's going to get like 50% or 100% better, and not 1,000% better from here in the short term. And that's probably a good thing, because it's not unbelievably disruptive at that point. It's more of an amplifier for what we're already doing.
And provides us a time to sink in the changes that are already happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Deepu?
I put it in two forward, I would say. One, I think I touched base a little earlier. The way I see things will be progressing will be in a predictive mode. Even before the recruiter comes and opens a requisition saying that I need 10 Java developers or Python developers, I'm sure that the system will be in a position to understand this was coming. I knew it. Because you have, just imagine a seasoned recruiter or a seasoned hiring manager, they will sense, okay, there is something going wrong. I think we might have to replace this person. I think that's the way, that intuition is always there. And wherever we say intuition today, that's the intelligence implemented tomorrow, if you look at it that way. So I don't think it's a complicated thing to be in a state where the system literally have that intuition to say, there might be a chance that I might have to source 10 Java developers or Python developers. Let me start the work right now in advance. Engage with them, source them, nurture them, filter them, do some sort of pre-screening, and keep it ready by the time the recruiter comes. Hey, these are the 10. That is one aspect. On the other side, I would say the way things are progressing, what we want to see is the recruiters literally spending time, personal human time, with that people who really matters. Because now you have 500 applicants and you can't expect and you don't want to spend time with each 500 and then identify the top 10. Instead, if the system can do a lot of these things, the recruiter can spend that quality time with that selected top few and have a very meaningful human personal conversation with them to take them forward, so that they get a feel that they are wanted in the organization. They get a feel that these are the right people for the organization. So that personal, highly contextual filtering will happen, so that you spend time with only those people who really matters to you for that job. It doesn't mean the company is bad. It doesn't mean the candidate is bad, just that it's not the right match. I think the predictive with that personal touch is something which personally we are looking forward to. At least I'm looking forward to in the next couple of years. That's where we are heading. That's what we feel.
Awesome. Thank you. So as Trisha has already, messaged, any attendees that have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section. I'll communicate it to Deepu or Phil, and we'll get a response. The first question is always the most difficult. Just waiting for who's going to ask that.
Yeah.
I've also found that to be the most interesting. Sets the tone for the entire conversation.
Manu, I have a question while we are waiting for other folks to join in. And this is for Deepu, what you just said right now, that when AI comes in, recruiters would have a lot of time to focus on the things that require a lot more human touch, right? So what are the aspects specifically to tech hiring where you believe that more human touch is required and where AI would help recruiters become better?
Right. So the way I look at it, even in our organization, that one area where we want our recruiters to have a personal touch with the candidate is because now the kind of market that they are in, it's a candidate's market. It's not like earlier day when a candidate had, multiple organizations, they come after the candidate. It's very difficult to get the right candidate. So there, you need to talk to them. You need to get their confidence. You need to talk to the candidates and understand what is their, aspiration. What is that you have in stock to, so that they grow in their career. So it's almost just a salary, right? That was again the previous generation. Now they want growth. They want work-life balance. They want, value. They want to add value in the organization. So all these things, you literally need to talk to them, spend time and understand. The more you talk to them, there is a more high chance that they will literally join you after accepting the offer letter, because there is a lot of cases wherein, you go to the stage until the offer is accepted, but then you have a no-show. You have a lot of situations where you schedule the interview, then you have a no-show for the interview. So this is the time when the recruiter also, even the candidate know that, yeah, I mean, this company might make sense to me. For that matter, even if the candidate didn't make the cut, he didn't or she didn't clear the interview. As a recruiter, you can always say that go 1 mile extra, talk to the interviewer or the hiring manager and understand why the candidate didn't make the cut. Communicate that back to the candidate and say, this is the reason, these are the area of improvement that the interviewer felt. These are small things which, that, your net promoter score will increase big time, which is actually good. I think if the candidate has spent 1 hour with you, you have the moral responsibility to talk to them and say what happened after the interview, not just a yes or no. The candidate, deserves the right to know why the person didn't make the cut. So these are the things where you can actually, as a recruiter, they can spend quality time to increase the brand visibility, increase the brand record, and have a better net promoter NPS score. Now, if you don't have those AI systems or automated systems, at the end of the day, even if the recruiter wants to do it, they won't get time for all this. These are luxury for them, and it doesn't happen. It will be like a mechanical process that they're doing. So that's the reason we iterate technology at the core, human at the core, and that is very much crucial. You need to empower the recruiters to make meaningful conversations, meaningful decisions throughout the process. The human touch should not be lacked. I think that is where you can actually spend more time. That's the reason why the top of the funnel, how much of a large it is, the moment it comes to a recruiter, it should be as small as possible.
Yeah, makes sense.
Did that answer your question?
Oh yeah, it did. Thank you, Deep. I think we have one more question, Manas.
Yes, people are good at tailoring their resume. How AI would help filter out such applications? Either one can pick up.
I think people, yeah, sure. I think even now people are trying to game, the applicant tracking system, resume parts, aspect of things. And like, that's always been a thing. And that will always be a thing in the future. I think the nice thing with AI is that you can go beyond the resume to ask more like probing specific questions. And so there'll be, courses on how to defeat the chatbot or whatever. Like, it'll always be sort of a cat and mouse game where you're getting closer and closer to quality. But I think what will be interesting is I think you can probably get higher signal from these AI-based assessments. And I also think that, realistically, if somebody is going through great lengths to prepare for interviews that are designed to get whether or not you're a good candidate, that's probably a good signal that they are like a working diligent person. So, there's a difference between somebody spending 15 minutes, like putting a few keywords into their resume to potentially get it through a screen, and somebody spending 5 hours learning how to better solve some sort of programming problem. Like that latter candidate is probably a good candidate, and that's not a bad signal.
Mm-hmm. I would like to just add one point to it, because I was just trying to find so that I can paste it in the chat. So there was this group of a few people, because we worked up a co-working space, and there was this interns who were hired by this facility, and they scheduled a meeting with me. And the topic was, how do we build an ATS friendly resume? So basically they want their whole intention was to understand how can they curate a resume so that the ATS will not reject them. So on one side, you're trying to make things intelligent, and the other side, people are trying to, circumvent that. I would say circumvent, but how can I ensure that my data points are, captured by any information extraction system? So I think there are people always try to, it's like a race. One side you try to make things better, other side people will try to, how I can circumvent that entire process. So I think that the race is always there. People want to make a resume to ensure that my skill proficiency is understood by an ATS. So they know how to write the resume such that the skill proficiency will be higher. So that's always there. So that's what I think, though how much ever you try, end of the day, you need to have certain skill assessments which can typically understand whether the candidate is good or not. How much ever they try to, circumvent this entire thing. So this happened, I think, almost a month back, where they wanted to understand how to build a resume so that it doesn't get rejected.
And AI is also helping them build these resumes as well, right, man, these days. Well, very interesting question. I don't know the name of the attendee, but thank you so much for that question. Do we have anyone else?
We have
Yes,
a couple more on the chat. I don't think people are using the Q&A button, but we have a couple more on the chat.
Let me look at the chat. So I have something from Smita, how AI is useful for non-IT or non-tech recruitment.
I think it's probably useful in the same exact ways. Deepu disagrees with me. So, but I personally think that it's going to help you source and screen. And I think that, the questions are different and the criteria and whatnot, but it's going to be pretty useful in those as well.
Yeah, same. That's right, the same thing. Because end of the day, it's a hiring process where you are actually, evaluating a person's skill, no matter whether it's IT or non-IT. It's the same process, right? End of the day. So I don't see any difference. Maybe the only difference is that in an IT scenario, maybe a coding skill or things can be tested online. But for a skilled labor kind of profile, I think an online assessment may not be possible. But I think with the advent of this, a lot of simulation and all those things, you can actually simulate a lot of environment, but it's pretty expensive now as we speak. So skill assessment might be a little different, but other than skill assessment, but again, subjective, objective questions could be covered, but the real hands-on skills could be something which might be a little different, but other than that, I think the philosophy remains the same. I don't see any difference in the way things are.
Cool. I have a question from Farhan, and Farhan, I'd love if you can elaborate a little bit more on this. Is Web3 the future of hiring? Now, I don't know if you talk about decentralized stuff or, using skills as NFT tokens, but that's why I'm asking about exact, what's the query. But if either Phil or Deepu understand this, please.
All right. Maybe I'll just take a tab at it. Yes, I'll probably take a tab at it because in Farhan, right? So what Farhan might have meant is maybe about more of an interactive or a simulated environment, probably. For example, there are multiple metaverse-based recruitment. So there was this, I think 4 years back, we were one of our initial customers. It's a banking customer. So we sold our recruitment platform. They were using it happily. And then they had this interesting requirement that they wanted to emulate an environment wherein the candidates should have, get an experience of how the day one will look like, or day one at a job. They wanted to test the candidate. Since it's a banking customer, they wanted to understand how, whether they have an affinity towards numbers, whether they have an affinity towards, numerical skills. So we actually had delivered at that time something called a simulation round, wherein the initial set of 15 minutes was about giving e-learning. It was about, you can just walk in through the banking environment, that office environment, introduce them each of the characters like a manager, senior manager, a cashier, or an office assistant. They interact with this person. It's a one-sided engagement like 4.5 years back. It was a one-sided engagement. They just talk about their role. And finally, we pass them through an assessment where they have to, look at us, check and write the number so that you get the, it's kind of a little immersive in nature. But I think with the advent of Metaverse and Web3, it will be more immersive, I would say. So I think that is what he might be saying, but I think it will be there, but a little too early, I would say, to comment on that, because it depends on currently the way we look at things. Technology is there, I think. Internet speed and things like that is okay, but end of the day, you end up fitting a big device on your head, which is, personally, I wouldn't prefer doing that. Maybe we will reach a situation where we can just wear a plain glass and do it. Probably, yes, I might do it, but I will never, I'll never be feeling that immersive feel, wearing a heavy AR, VR glass and trying to get a feel of it, maybe, but not immediately. Probably 5 years down the line, Web3 might be a future of recruitment. So you exactly know where you're going to join. You exactly know how your teammates are going to behave to you. You know how the work culture is going to be there. I think we will be there, but may take some time. That's my take.
I almost wonder if Farhan is being like sarcastic and sort of like, 2 years ago, we might have had this webinar. It's like, how's Web3 changing? And now, AI is like the hype. But I think that probably the big difference is like, we've all been using AI almost every single day for the last like 10 years or more, right? Like use Google search, you know, like I have Tesla, it kind of drives itself on the highway. Like there's already like all these like really good use cases. And with, you know, recruiting and sourcing, it's not like, yeah, like next year or like maybe in the future or whatever. It's like, yeah, like right now, today, tomorrow, you can use this technology. And so it's a lot more real, in my opinion, than the Web3 stuff that was more speculative and like, you know, here's a JPEG that will get you something maybe in the future and it's worth $50,000 for no reason. I think it's a bit different.
Maybe. But thanks, Farhan, for that question. Very interesting. Being cognizant of the time, we just have another couple of minutes. I'll take one last question that came through email, which is, if you were to train an AI model for screening, what are the top 3 tech skills or skill markers that you would look for? Very interesting. And I know Deepu has spoken a lot about training the models. I don't know if he wants to take this, or both of you want to take a dive at it.
Sure. So if we put to train an AI model for training, 3 aspects that I would look for is, one is the proficiency level. Again, the proficiency level can be divided into 2 parts. One is the claimed, or like the self-proclaimed proficiency level. Like, I feel that I'm good. Then you have something called a demonstrated proficiency, right? So that is where the assessment tools comes into picture. Like, I mean, you take HackerEarth or you take any automated assessments for that matter. That is the demonstrated proficiency. So you will have to understand the demonstrated proficiency. You will have to understand the inclination or the proclaimed proficiency. Both are different. So that would be one aspect that I would typically consider. Then the next one would be the number of years of experience that a candidate has in that particular skill. Even if I say that I am good at AI, I got a good score for an AI assessment based on AI. Does that mean I'm good? Maybe, may not be, but the number of years of experience that I had at a particular skill matters a lot. Whether I have just internship experience, then I would say that knowledge is more academic in nature, which is good. I'm not saying that is bad. I don't want to generalize here, but again, experience that you have accrued over the professional fabric is really different from what you have learned from your college. It has its own difference. Both are good in its own term, but it's different. So one is a proficiency level, both inclination and demonstration. The second would be the tenure of that particular thing. And the third one is the reason. I mean, how recently have you worked on that particular skill? For example, I say that I worked on Java, but I have worked on last on Java in 2013, for example. I might have worked for 8 years straight on Java platform, but until 2013, versus the candidate who worked on Java for the last 3 years, 2020 to 2023. There's a lot of difference. You can imagine, you can visualize that, right? He has most recently he had worked on that technology. So if I have to say what are the 3 top skill markers, it would be proficiency, it would be total tenure of experience, and how recently have you worked on it. So these 3 would play a critical role if I were to train an AI model for that.
Cool. Thank you so much. I think they're very relevant: proficiency, tenure, and recency. With that, I am going to call it a wrap. First of all, extremely thankful to the both of you for taking the time out and, having this conversation. A lot of thanks to the HackerEarth team for helping us arrange it. It was really, really seamless. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. And our attendees who have been patient and stuck around with us so long. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Nice evening. Bye-bye.